Hi, I'm Laura. People need to know what really happens behind those perfect family dinner photos and polite smiles. My mother, Sarah, started showing signs of early dementia last year. It began with little things, misplaced keys, repeated questions. But she's still my mom, the woman who raised me single-handedly after Dad passed. She's still the strongest person I know. When I married James 3 years ago, she was overjoyed. She called him the son she never had, bragging to anyone who'd listen. Back then, our monthly dinners at my in-laws' house were bearable. Barbara, my mother-in-law, took pride in hosting them in her immaculate dining room, where everything matched, right down to the napkin rings. She'd serve her famous pot roast while boasting about Robert's position on the hospital board. Across the table, my sister-in-law Madison and I would exchange subtle eye rolls at her relentless social climbing. But last month, things took a darker turn. "Your mother seems different lately," Barbara said, arranging flowers in a crystal vase without so much as a glance in my direction. I stiffened. "She's been having some memory issues. We're working with her doctors." "Well, I certainly hope it's not hereditary," Barbara replied, her voice dripping with mock concern. "It would be such a shame for any future grandchildren." James squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea for me to let it go. That's James for you, always trying to keep the peace, even when his silence cuts deeper than Barbara's words. Later that night, Madison pulled me aside. "I heard what Mom said. She's being awful, Laura. And I've noticed how she treats Sarah, those little digs." "Thanks," I murmured, grateful but weary. Sometimes I wonder if I'm imagining it. "You're not, and Robert's no better. Yesterday, he actually joked about getting Sarah a GPS tracker, like she's a lost pet. Mom had been joining us for these dinners since her diagnosis. I didn't want her sitting at home alone, and I thought being around family might help. But instead, Barbara's comments grew crueler, her tongue sharper. She'd ask Mom complicated questions, then share a knowing look with Robert when Mom hesitated. Last week, Mom forgot Barbara's name. Instead of showing understanding, Barbara spent the entire evening sharing stories about other people with mental issues she'd known. Robert chuckled along, and James just stared at his plate. Later, Madison texted me, "They're getting worse. Something needs to be done." She was right. I just didn't realize how bad things would get until tonight's dinner. Looking back, the signs were all there, the snide remarks, the cruel setups, their growing boldness. But I never imagined they'd go as far as they did. Mom was having a good day when we arrived. She greeted James by name and even complimented Barbara's haircut. That should have been a warning. "Oh, Sarah," Barbara said with a laugh sharp enough to cut glass. "I've had this style since James and Laura's wedding. Don't you remember? You were there, I think." I felt Mom stiffen beside me. "I'm sorry," I thought. "Dinner smells great," Madison interrupted, flashing me an apologetic look. "Is this your special pot roast?" But Barbara wasn't done. Over the next 20 minutes, she peppered Mom with pointed, detailed questions each time Mom hesitated or mixed up a detail about my wedding. Barbara would pounce. Her corrections grew louder and more condescending with every slip. "Sarah, dear, you were wearing blue, not purple. And you gave that lovely speech. Oh wait, you didn't, did you? You weren't feeling well that day. Something about forgetting what you wanted to say." Robert chuckled from behind his wine glass. "Better to forget a speech than make a fool of yourself, right?" My voice shook. "Stop it. Both of you, just stop." "Laura," James began, reaching for my arm. "No, James, I'm done watching them torture her." Mom glanced around the table, her eyes clouded with confusion. "Did I say something wrong?" "Everything you say is wrong lately," Barbara snapped. "You can't remember anything. You're making everyone uncomfortable with your condition." "Barbara." Madison gasped. "Well, someone had to say it. She's crazy, and Laura's just enabling her by bringing her to these dinners. She belongs in a home where they can handle people like her." The room fell silent. Mom's hands trembled as she folded her napkin. I think I'd like to go home now." "See," Barbara sneered. "She can't even handle a simple dinner conversation." I stood so quickly my chair clattered to the floor. "The only crazy person here is you, Barbara. You've been bullying her all night, deliberately trying to confuse her. What kind of person mocks someone with dementia?" "Now wait just a minute," Robert began. "No, you wait. I snapped, helping Mom to her feet. You sit in this house, acting so superior while deliberately hurting a sick woman. You're monsters. James, are you going to let her speak to us this way? Barbara demanded, turning to her son. I looked at him silently pleading. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stared at his plate. Typical. Grabbing my purse, I said, "Come on, Mom. We're done here." Madison followed us to the door. "Laura, wait." But I was already helping Mom into the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Barbara standing at the window smirking. She had no idea what she just started. The next morning, Madison called. "I have something you need to see." She sent me screenshots of Barbara's private social media posts, dozens of them, each more cruel than the last. Having another delightful dinner with my forgetful in-law. Maybe we should start charging her for the entertainment she provides. #resign laws, #send her away. Barbara had been mocking Mom online for months, sharing her funny moments with her country club friends. Robert had chimed in on several, adding his own tasteless jokes. "I've been documenting everything," Madison said. Their comments at dinner, Dad's jokes at his hospital board meetings about losing it like Sarah. Even this group chat Mom started with her charity friends where they shared dementia stories for laughs. Does James know? He does now. I showed him everything this morning. He's not taking it well. When James came home that evening, he looked destroyed. I had no idea they were. I mean, I knew they made comments, but this is systematic cruelty. "Laura, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to them." "You can stand up to them now," I said firmly. Together, we formulated a plan. Madison kept collecting evidence while James and I continued attending dinners. But this time we were prepared. I recorded everything on my phone while James finally started calling out his parents' behavior. "Mom, that comment about memory care homes being storage units for defective people, do you really think that's appropriate?" Barbara would backtrack, feigning concern, but the recordings captured her true colors every time. The real turning point came when Madison discovered Robert had been sharing his hilarious stories about Mom at hospital board meetings. Many board members had elderly parents with dementia and found his remarks deeply offensive. "Half the board is ready to vote him out," Madison reported. "And Mom's charity friends. Turns out the organization specifically supports families dealing with elderly care issues." Someone anonymously sent them her social media posts. "Who would do such a thing?" Barbara had wailed when she found out. "I have no idea," I said with a smile as Madison winked at me. Barbara's carefully curated social image was crumbling, and Robert's position was becoming untenable. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. At the next family dinner, James stood up. His voice was steady but firm. "I've been quiet too long. What you're doing to Sarah, to my mother-in-law, ends now. I've seen the posts, the messages, the stories. You're not the people I thought you were," James said, his voice steady but filled with quiet anger. "James, darling, you're overreacting," Barbara began, her smile faltering. "No, Mom," James cut her off, standing tall. "I'm finally reacting, and you're not going to like what happens next." I squeezed his hand as Barbara's face paled, her perfect world finally cracking. She realized too late that the life she'd so meticulously curated was about to shatter, and I was going to savor watching every piece fall apart. The fall of Barbara and Robert's social empire was as satisfying as watching dominoes collapse in slow motion, beautiful, inevitable, and entirely their own doing. First came the hospital board meeting. Robert, ever smug, tried one of his usual dementia jokes. This time, no one laughed. Dr. Phillips, whose father had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, stood and called for an immediate vote of confidence. It wasn't even close. Robert was removed from the board before dessert was served. Barbara's downfall followed soon after. Her charity organization not only distanced themselves from her, but also used her mocking social media posts as examples in their sensitivity training sessions. This is how not to treat families dealing with memory care issues. Barbara's indignation was almost comical. "They're saying I'm an example of elder abuse." She wailed at what turned out to be her last attempt at hosting a family dinner. The table was half empty. Most of the family had stopped coming. "This is all your fault, Laura." "No, Barbara. This is what accountability looks like," I said. Madison, sitting beside me, chimed in. You did this to yourself, Mom. Every cruel comment, every mocking post, every joke at someone else's expense. It all caught up with you. But the real victory wasn't in their social downfall. It was in the community's response to Mom. A local memory care support group reached out after hearing our story. Now Mom has a network of friends and families who truly understand what she's going through. She's even started helping newly diagnosed patients navigate their journeys. As for James, he found his voice and his backbone. He still loves his parents but set firm boundaries. They can be part of our lives when they show real change and genuine remorse. Until then, we're better off without their toxicity. Last week, Barbara tried apologizing. Well, sort of. I may have been a bit insensitive. Can't we just move past this, like Sarah moves past her memories? Barbara, no, some things don't deserve forgiveness, I said firmly. I ran into Robert at the grocery store the other day. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing without his hospital board position and diminished social standing. He started to approach us, but Mom, clear as day, looked him in the eye and said, "I remember you. You're the man who laughed at me." We left him standing there, frozen in the frozen food aisle. Madison comes over regularly now. She and Mom have developed a special bond, working on puzzles together. Madison patiently helps when Mom gets stuck, treating her with the kindness she deserves. "This is what family really means," Madison said to me one afternoon. "Not those fake dinners and social climbing games." Mom still has good days and bad days. She forgets things sometimes, and she gets confused, but now she's surrounded by people who treat her with dignity and respect. And me, I've learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's letting toxic people face the consequences of their actions. As for Barbara and Robert, last I heard, they're thinking of moving to another state for a fresh start. What would you have done in James's position? Would you stay silent to keep the peace or stand up against toxic behavior? Share your thoughts below.